Hello and welcome to another video from Mr. Miz Nation, and it is time to once again do a race review of the actual real life F1, and this time it is round 4 in China, and possibly the biggest procession race of the season, I guess you could say. It really wasn't the best race at all. It was pretty boring. I almost fell asleep, but it does raise a lot of questions once again. Like, are Ferrari back where they are used to, kind of more towards the front? What the hell's going on with McLaren? And can Nico Rosberg finally, or can Nico Rosberg compete with Lewis Hamilton after Hamilton's 3 wins in the last 4 races? So anyway, let's just go on with my normal format, 20-second to first. Surprisingly, there was only 2 DNFs in this race, which is maybe potentially why it was boring as well, but there was no safety cars either. So Till was the first to DNF on lap 5. I believe that's his second DNF in 2 races now. Really has been an abysmal season for Adrian Sutil so far. He's had the weight issues with the new cars and trying to keep the weight problems down. He didn't race with a drinks bottle at Bahrain. The car's just been poor for him, and it's really been a terrible move to Sauber so far. And I mean, you got to feel for him a bit, because Gutierrez hasn't exactly been having as many problems apart from ending up upside down at Bahrain. But I mean, I'm not quite sure what the problem was. I think it was just probably something to do with a loss of power or something. But I mean, he was pretty much down to last place off the start anyway, so disaster for him. Romain Grosjean, 21st, bitterly disappointing for him. He was having a great weekend, somehow dragging that Lotus into the top 10 in qualifying and for the majority of the race before his DNF. I think he just lost 4th gear, which is quite a bad gear to lose in F1, I would say, especially around a track like China, where there's a lot of kind of mid-speed corners and kind of low-speed corners. So I mean, that's disappointing for Grosjean, but I'm sure he's going to bounce back. And I mean, that Lotus car theoretically can only get better. I mean, Maldonado was fighting up there at a few points, so surely it can only get better. They're definitely striving towards where they need to be now anyway. I mean, he was mixing up with Raikkonen quite a bit at the start, so bitterly disappointing for Grosjean, but I mean, it's something to work off. Ericsson in 20th, once again, he just got to the finish. He'll be happy with that after not finishing in Bahrain. Max Chilton, 19th, somehow finished again. Once again, I have no idea. There's going to be one race this season, surely, where he's going to DNF. Kobayashi, 18th, should have been 17th, but the whole flag debacle where they managed to throw the flag out 2 laps before it should have been basically meant that Kobayashi's overtake on Bianchi was completely voided and didn't count, as his second checkered flag didn't actually count. So a bit disappointing for Kobayashi there, especially trying to in the kind of Marussia Caterham War, even though it wouldn't really matter too much. It's more the positions, like 13th on like a good day, which I believe Marussia now have, but I'm not quite sure. Anyway, 16th, Gutierrez, pretty quiet race for him really. The only action I really saw was battling for 14th with Magnussen, but I mean, as I just said, that Sauber is so poor that it's going to be incredibly difficult for him to get anywhere near any points regions really, and I mean, I think he'll just be happy that he wasn't facing upside down in this race, to be frankly honest. 15th, Felipe Massa, another bitterly disappointing drive really. Well, not really a drive, it's just his pit crew completely messed up the pit stop, his first pit stop. I mean, I believe it was actually because of his contact with Alonso at the start. He obviously kind of he got a brilliant start, did Massa. I mean, from 6 on the grid, I think it was, and then he just kind of moved across a bit, which was a bit dangerous, really. Kind of like well, it wasn't really like Hamilton in Spa 2012, but I mean, it was a pretty dangerous swipe, and it was the gap was kind of closing, and it just all got a bit messy, and somehow Alonso stayed in the race. I'm still not quite sure how that happened, but I think that was the main problem for Massa's pit stop, really. But yeah, a bit frustrating for Massa, considering he's had bad luck in at least 3 of the 4 races, really. I mean, getting hit off at Australia, the safety car coming out in Bahrain didn't help him, and now this. So he'll be disappointed that he didn't get the points there, and it also maybe cements Bottas's chances of becoming the #1 driver of that team as well. We've got Maldonado in 14th, not a bad drive by him, most positions gained by anyone in the race. Not really too surprising considering where he started, but I mean, he did go forwards, which is a crucial thing. Finished ahead of Sauber, and you've got to say the Lotus could potentially be ahead of that Sauber soon in like a power rankings thing, or a in terms of pace now, really, because I mean, he was ahead of Gutierrez. There was that kind of moment where Maldonado was trying to overtake Gutierrez, and you thought this might not end well, but luckily it did end well for Maldonado, and he stayed out of trouble for once. So a solid 14th in a car that probably deserved to be there. Then you've got, well, I'll do the next 4 kind of in a line, because you kind of got the 2 teams in there. You've got 11th and 13th, Jenson Button 11th, and Kevin Magnussen 13th. McLaren, very, very disappointing. I mean, when they got a double podium at Australia, you were thinking maybe this is a time where McLaren has finally rejuvenated. Ron Dennis said they're going to win a race. A lot of people bought into the hype. A lot of people bought into the hype of Kevin Magnussen, including me. But it really has just gone downhill. I mean, they were relatively okay in Malaysia, but the last 2 races have been incredibly poor for them. And I mean, they really need to get their act together, otherwise it's going to be a similar story to 2013. And by probably like Spa time, maybe even a bit earlier, they'll probably be focusing towards 2015 if they don't sort their act out. So I mean, worrying times for Jenson Button especially, who will probably have wanted to end his career a bit better, because I mean, he's really not got many years left in him now, you would think. So it'd be a bit of a shame if he had to end his career was in a McLaren that's just so poor at the moment. And Magnussen, you got to feel for him as well. I mean, he's been involved in a few incidents, but apart from that, you can't really do much with that McLaren at the moment. And then the Toro Rossos, Kvyat in 10th and Verne in 12th. And I mean, you could even make an argument that the Toro Rosso is now ahead of the McLaren in terms of pace potentially. I mean, it's not exactly like the McLarens were really fighting them. And I mean, a great result for Kvyat again. I mean, I thought Verne might kind of beat him in this race after that qualifying performance, but once again, Kvyat just managed to pull the performance out of the bag. Super youngster. And I mean, he seems to constantly screw up my Castrol F1 predictor by constantly putting it in the points. He just seems to find a way to nab a point or two, and he's seriously beating his teammate at the moment in terms of a teammate challenge, I guess. So I mean, Verne's really got to get his act together in the European season, otherwise he's in trouble. But it's looking promising for Kvyat and Toro Rosso in terms of maybe getting ahead of McLaren, especially after their troubles in testing, you have to say, was Renault. Anyway, 9th place, Sergio Perez. Relatively quiet race considering what happened in Bahrain with him. I mean, I think it was going to be difficult for him to get in the top 5 or just repeat his Bahrain success at all, really. I mean, he seems to be one of those kind of drivers that has that kind of one-hit wonder success and then has a few kind of mediocre races around it. And I mean, his races before Bahrain weren't brilliant, and I mean, 9th is an okay result, really. I think he would have liked to have probably got ahead of Raikkonen maybe, but sadly that didn't happen for him. Kimi Raikkonen, 8th place. Again, you have to say that's disappointing for him, considering Alonso was about 40 seconds ahead of him at the end. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous, that gap, and I mean, is he just in it for the money now? Who knows? I wouldn't be surprised if Raikkonen isn't in the sport in 2015, to be honest, because that car looks like it's a handful to drive for him. And I mean, I think Alonso may have got it sorted now and going into the European season, but it may take Raikkonen at least half the season, maybe even the whole season, to figure out this car, because he just doesn't seem to like it at all. Which is a shame, because it's nice to see Raikkonen do well, but I mean, he's nowhere near where he was in that Lotus when he was in it, so I mean, it's disappointing for him. Anyway, Bottas in 7th. Good drive by him, solid drive. Bit of a shame for him that he couldn't get past Hulkenberg towards the end, although if he had on the last lap it probably wouldn't have mattered because of the whole checkered flag debacle. But I mean, he did have that contact with Rosberg at the start. I mean, that was a bit of a weird one. He just kind of appeared from out of nowhere around the outside of Rosberg's car. But it didn't really hamper them too much, to be honest. I mean, it was a small piece of contact. Really. It affected Rosberg more, if anything. But Bottas, that's a great drive, and I mean, he'll be hoping to push on further and maybe try and get into the top 5 in the next race, which is, of course, 3 weeks away now. Nico Hülkenberg 6, another great drive. You just can't hold this man down. I mean, he is down to 4th in the championship, but I don't think many people would have predicted Hülkenberg 4th in the championship at the start of the season after 4 races. So I mean, it's another great drive. I mean, he's getting those solid results constantly, and Martin Brundle once again pointed out on commentary that he's just up there again. I mean, he did have a bit of a struggle holding Bottas off. I think that Williams is slightly ahead of Force India in terms of pace, but I mean, it is a great result. I thought he might finish higher because of that Force India and Mercedes engine. I thought it'd kind of give him a lot more of a power boost up down the straights, but he just couldn't quite keep up with those 2 Red Bulls. Speaking of the Red Bulls, it's probably the most interesting part of the race, the team orders debacle, I guess, along with the checkered flag debacle. Ricciardo and Vettel, basically, Ricciardo was quite a bit quicker than Vettel, you would say, trying to get past him in about the middle of the race. He was on fresher tyres, and the team came onto the radio for Vettel and asked, or Rocky came onto the radio and asked Vettel to let him through. He didn't, and then another one came through, and Vettel asked what tyres he was on, and then Rocky said primes, and then Vettel said tough luck, which was a pretty good radio message. I think it's a bit hypocritical if people kind of don't like team orders, but then kind of say that it's bad that Vettel doesn't follow them, to be honest. So I was kind of happy to see that. I really do hate team orders, and I think people should just disobey them constantly unless it really is unless there's a situation like Bahrain, obviously, where Vettel was on the different tyres to Ricciardo and he was obviously slower. I mean, Vettel wasn't really costing Ricciardo that much, and I mean, he did end up getting through anyway, Ricciardo, pretty quickly. It didn't look like Vettel was yielding. Well, it kind of looked like he went wide and then he kind of gave up on trying to get the position back, so he just kind of yielded. But I mean, apart from that, I mean, Vettel just kind of fell off towards the end of the race after a great start and ended up 22 seconds behind Ricciardo, who had another stupendous drive, a brilliant drive up to 4th place. But I think he'll be a bit frustrated that that's now 2 4th places in a row, and he's just missed out on the podium by about 4 or 5 seconds once again. So he'll be hunting for that podium in the next race, and I mean, he's finally starting to get his luck together, so that's nice to see for Dan Ricciardo. Anyway, 3rd place, Fernando Alonso. Once again, he's put in that performance, that miraculous performance in the prancing horse, and I mean, you just can't keep this man down. He is the scrapper, he is the Spanish sensation, and I mean, he somehow got up to 3rd place. I mean, it was a superb start by Alonso. Really great start, almost, well, he did get up to 2nd in the end because of undercuts and everything, but I mean, he did hold off Rosberg for 3/4 of the race, really, until Rosberg got through around lap 42-ish, I believe. But yeah, I mean, Alonso did very, very well in that Ferrari to get out there, especially considering how much Raikkonen's struggling with it. But I mean, it's hard to tell whether Ferrari are back on kind of form, I guess, or if Alonso just dragged it up there again. Probably the latter, I would say. That's usually the case. Anyway, front 2, Nico Rosberg, very, very not the best weekend for him at all, really. I mean, he completely messed up in qualifying with that spin at the end and also running wide on his first running lap in Q3. Poor start from him, hit Bottas at the first corner. I mean, it took him a while to come back through, and obviously I think pretty much everyone knew if there wasn't a Red Bull in front of Hamilton after the first turn or after the first lap, and if there wasn't Rosberg breathing down his neck on the first lap, then Hamilton was probably going to run away with the win, and that's basically exactly what happened. Rosberg was a horrid start, no telemetry for half the race as well, or in fact the whole race, sorry, so it was quite difficult for him. And also I just want to point out that Bottas also had apparently used zero amount of fuel. 0% of fuel was used by Bottas, so apparently he was running on nothing, which is pretty impressive that it considering he finished 7th. But anyway, Hamilton pretty much ran away with it again. I mean, you just couldn't stop him. It was a 10-second gap before the first stops, and I mean, it was a procession at the front, really. I mean, there really wasn't much focus on the front. I mean, the main focus was from 2nd down to 5th, really. There was, apart from that, I mean, I would say that at least 75% of the Sky F1 coverage was literally just focusing on 2nd down to 5th, the 2 Red Bulls, Alonso and Rosberg, really, and Massa's woes. I mean, that was the really only interesting bit, really, to be honest. So, a bit of a procession. It will bring up the question of, is this new Formula 1 good for the sport or not again, after the quarrels after Bahrain about it actually being good. But I mean, I guess we'll see in Catalonia, maybe the European races will spark some interesting races. The development will be interesting going into Catalonia as well. But yeah, sadly, Williams not getting on the podium means that one of my predictions in my bold 5 predictions video has not come true, so that's a bit disappointing for me. But yeah, so Hamilton wins, Ferrari maybe back in the running, but overall it was a bit of a dull race. Maybe they need to do something with China because it is a bit dull usually. But anyway, this has been the episode 4, oh not episode 4, race 4 Chinese Grand Prix race review. So thank you for watching, and until